Hi everyone, it's Elizabeth here. So I wanted to do this video in regards to talking about near-death experiences and how it helps people find their soul purpose, as well as it being kind of proof that miracles happen in life. I have never had a near-death experience, but I've studied so many different types of I guess like spiritual theories, and I've been a part of so many different spiritual communities through the years that I've met a lot of people who have had near-death experiences, and every story is different on how or why they experienced that near-death experience, but a lot of them continue to claim a lot of the same things, which is when the soul has exited the body, they do feel the most abundant type of warmth and love, and although their physical body is dying or is technically dead, they are in a state of being comforted and love, and a lot of them have claimed of seeing like a bright white light. So near-death experiences have always fascinated me. I guess as a spiritual person, I've always wanted to have these abilities to leave my body. I do think I do that during my dream state, but I've tried to do like guided meditations for having out-of-body experiences, and I think there's just something within me that's a little too scared to do it. I'm just kind of stuck on planet Earth with actually consciously trying to leave the body. I do think I do it, like I said, in the dream state. But I wanted to talk about somebody who I met many years ago who told me about their near-death experience. So I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and I was with my ex-husband at a Cleveland Indians game many years ago. This might have been 2016, or I think maybe before we left for Germany, so 2014. So we were just standing at the bullpen at the Mariners Stadium, Cleveland versus Seattle. And we started talking and chatting up with this guy who is also from Cleveland. And it's very common if you're from Cleveland or in the Midwest to just start talking to people. It's a very friendly thing, or city. Anywho, the guy, we kind of just talked about, how did you make it out here? Why did you come to Seattle? And he was explaining that his story was a little bit interesting. So if I remember correctly, all of the details, he was at a house party in Cleveland, and I believe it was the Tremont area, and he was actually shot by a drive-by shooting, and I thought that he said that it was with a rifle, and I believe that it grazed his lung. I can't remember if it grazed his lung or up near the head. I don't think he was shot in the head, but anyways, where I'm going with this is that he was in a coma. And so while he was in the hospital in the coma, he had an out-of-body experience. He said he remembers that his body floated, or his soul floated out of the body, and he saw his body, his parents, the doctors. He saw everything happening in that emergency room. But during that state of moment that he knew that he was dying, that he felt so much love and warmth, and it was the most kind of peace that he said he's ever experienced in his life. And he just knew that whatever happened, that he would be loved. When he entered his body, he eventually, later on came out of the coma. And what he ended up doing was that he really liked a girl who he met, who moved out to Seattle, Washington. And so basically that near-death experience kind of told him that he was going to stop living in fear and move out to the West Coast to be with her. And today they are married and they have a child together. And the one interesting thing that he told me was that he was bipolar. And after being in that coma and having that near-death experience, that he was no longer bipolar and didn't need any of the meds anymore. And so for me, that was very, very mind-blowing, because I actually on the first hand heard this incredible near-death experience from just some random person from Cleveland, that it wasn't through, a spiritual workshop. It's like we just randomly met each other, and I was so blown away by his story. And then when I was in Arizona in the spring, I met a lady. She's a kind of like a psychic psychologist. She's a psychologist, but very intuitive and psychic. And she had a near-death experience as well. And her near-death experience was basically a wake-up call of like, your soul is either going to go up into heaven and you're going to reincarnate and do the same shit again because you're not living to your soul's purpose, or you're going to go back downstairs, back to the earth plane, and live out your soul mission in life. And she chose to come back down. And that set her up into a completely different path of, her job and things like that. And so I can note her information down below. Her name is Leslie Lupo. She's located in Tucson, Arizona. I found her to be a very fascinating person to work with. So I guess where I'm going with this is everybody has a different experience with their near-death experience, but a lot of people tend to talk about how they weren't living their soul mission and they ended up nearly dying or developing some sort of chronic disease like cancer, which was basically their wake-up call to either change what they're doing and live your soul mission, or if not, your life is going to be taken and you're going to come back to the spirit world. And I will link this blog link below. When I published my book, Finding Om, in October of 2015, October 2015, I was in the Lagos, Portugal, and I just ended up going to like a yoga studio that had a workshop from a lady, and it was the same thing. She was working in HR. She was a Portuguese woman born in Africa, and she was just living her life in HR, and she ended up getting cancer, and a big wake-up call from getting cancer was that she wasn't living her soul purpose. So she ended up, becoming a healer and goes to different parts of the world to kind of help souls that are stuck on this planet, help navigate them. So like places, she's gone to like Mayan cultures in Egypt, so places that have had a lot of hardship, and just helps these souls kind of transition out into the spirit world. So if you're a really logical person, you're listening to this, you're like, God, these people are crazy. But I think it's when you've exercised your spirit to the intensity like some people exercise their body, you do know that the unforeseen world has its truths. And a lot of times people get these miracles or these wake-up calls because of almost nearly dying. All you have to do is go into YouTube and type in NDE or near-death experience, and you're going to find hundreds of different videos that talk about people who had near-death experiences. And from my perspective, it is a wake-up call for people to live their soul mission, especially if they are here to do some form of change or some form of healing on this planet, whether it is through activism or just being a healer for people, like you're a Reiki person, or maybe you're like this woman where you're actually traveling around and kind of working through the muck of the energy that's kind of stuck there. So everyone has their own role and purpose to play in this life, and some people's role in their life purpose is simply to become a mother or a father. They're not going to have this extraordinary life of being like the next Jeff Bezos or Steve Jobs, where you create some website or product that revolutionizes the world. I think so many people, especially younger millennials, have these pipeline dreams of wanting to like revolutionize or change the world. And the reality is the best way to do that, the revolution, is coming from within and from changing ourselves, because we are like the ocean. We have a ripple effect where we can affect people in positive and negative ways. I don't think solely just thinking about life from a rosy-eyed glasses positive perspective is something that we should just live in this, absolute land of positivity. I think being realistic can seem pessimistic, but you do need to live in reality as well, because a lot of fantasy is created by all of this rosy-eye or rose-colored glasses type of perspective. To some degree, we all live in our own bubbles, and there's nothing wrong with that. But on the one end, in the example that I shared from the guy from Cleveland, he was cured from being bipolar. That's pretty impressive and amazing. You don't really hear every day that someone just wakes up and all of a sudden, they're healed from autism or from Asperger's and things like that. So there is something that happens in the near-death experience where you are tapping into that higher self, and so that super consciousness, that the soul is getting access to the spiritual world, that it is kind of to some degree detaching a little bit from the egoic body, which is something that we all have issues with on this earth plane. So I guess like a good question is, I read it on a blog, is what if near-death experiences are actually encoded into our subtle bodies before birth, having been placed there by our soul before we incarnate to help us wake up to our purpose and initiate the process of deep remembering that supports us in the surrendering of the ego to the soul. So the soul and the ego, they are, I guess, connected. So in any embodiment of being a human, the soul can have the greatest impact when there is a close relationship between the soul and the ego, as this strengthens the capacity for the soul's work. A close relationship helps the ego surrender its hold, thus facilitating the soul's multidimensional nature to take hold and fully embody all that is. Now, the thing is, we have to be able to understand what our healthy ego is, because in other videos I explained you have the superior ego, which means that you think you're better than everybody, and then you have the inferior ego, which is that lack of self-esteem, that you think you're not good enough or you're not worthy of being loved or provided for and things like that. Just a couple other like little thoughts on near-death experiences. Well, each person's near-death experience will be relevant to their past soul experiences and relevant to what their purpose is in any lifetime. Helping the ego to surrender its hold creates a very different life for the being who returns. A life lived via the soul in connection with consciousness is very different to a life lived via ego with consciousness. Without connection and full of separation. The soul knows this and wants itself to grow as much as possible during each incarnation, while also facilitating each human incarnation to fulfill its purpose. So I guess when you are up in the ethers having this near-death experience, it's almost like being in a sea of consciousness, and a lot of that is timeless and formless, and it's full of unconditional love. It has no judgment, it has no separation, there's no beginning and no end, and that is in itself what a near-death experience is. So these are just some thoughts that I have. If you've had a near-death experience, I would love to hear it, because this stuff fascinates me. I believe that a lot of these near-death experiences not only help people find their soul purpose and mission, or are like great inspirational stories on miracles, and to help the soul grow. But I do think it helps people live through the soul, because when you're stuck here on this material plane, on the earth plane, you are living a little bit more egoically and living through a lot of that superficial type of lifestyle or mindset, because you always want more. You want the next promotion, or you want now you're making $80,000 and now that's not enough. You want to make $100,000. So there's a lot of that superficialness, and a lot of the material stuff actually roots from the dark, which is the opposite of kind of godly and soul love. And why did I bring this up? So the purpose of me bringing this up, oh yeah, because there was one guy that I listened to on his near-death experience on YouTube once, and he had a near-death experience which completely revolutionized his life. He said that he made a lot of money, and I think he was in the club industry, so he had the cars, he had the women and all of that, and I think he owned the nightclubs, I think. But after that experience, he just like completely left that lifestyle of kind of this lust and money and this material way of living, and completely just found serenity in the simple life of just living like a modest life, through like farming and things like that, and just getting your hands in touch with the planet and the earth and stuff. So yeah, it's quite fascinating, because that in itself is a miracle. I mean, think about how toxic a lot of that nightclub lifestyle is. People are addicted to the high of the music, the drugs, the sex, They're always getting attention, especially the men. They always have women, crawling after them because they have a lot of money and women want drinks and all this stuff like that. So, I don't know. It's just kind of fascinating. Near-death experiences blow my mind away. I sure as hell hope I don't have one because that would be kind of tragic. But the reason why I brought this video up also, because this stuff has been lingering in my mind, is because as I went home recently to Ohio, I reminisced on a time that I almost drowned in Florida. I think I was like 7 or 8. And then I remember when I was younger, I was like 4 or 5, and I almost drowned in a pond. So I've almost died at several occasions. Luckily, I've been rescued both times. And the irony is, like, how this happened drowning is, like, beyond me. It's not like I fell off the monkey bars and was in a coma, and then the next time, I got in a car accident. It's like, no, like, both times these were through drowning. So luckily I don't know, maybe I had some experiences as a kid, too, while in that I don't remember. But the one in the ocean, yeah, I was stung by a Portuguese man of war and just, like, tumbled under the water, and I couldn't get up and out, especially from being stung. And yeah, the other time I was just drowning in a pond, and my mother luckily was able to pull me out. So anyways, love to hear your experience or your thoughts on near-death experiences. They kind of blow my mind away. So I think science is probably starting to help us understand this more, and I am an advocate for science helping us understand what goes on spiritually, because there are different parts in the brain that light up that, do see the light. And, spiritually, when you see the light, this is, that's coming from a higher source. All right. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. If you have any questions or comments, please post them below. You can also support me on Patreon or make donations if you feel that you'd like to do that. And have a great day. See you next time. Bye.